domestically, as long as you pay the proper taxes, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I'll go to that separately later. Kasi may issue din akong konti doon. But I was just going to your proposal and Senator Chi's proposal na pag finance, it's more important to fence the Freeport area because dun mo it's like the bonded warehouse, di ba? That's why nako-confuse nga ako what part of the eco zone is eco zone and what part is Freeport.
Mr. President, to clarify, my proposal pertains to the zone, not only the Freeport. Because my problem, if it's only the Freeport, which in this case refers to the airport, because there's no port here and there's no plan to create a port here. My problem is if we will only fence the Freeport, the manufacturing plant can be within the zone, and how can you now guard against them selling domestically without paying the proper taxes? So my proposal applies to the zone, to buzz.
Economic zone.
To the buzz, not the Freeport
But if
alone.
that's the case, sa laki ng Bulacan, we will need to advise from President Trump kung paano gumawa ng wall all around Bulacan.
Mr. President,
Kasi ang laki
malayong
ng
mas
Bulacan.
magaling ang Pinoy kaysa sa mga Amerikano on the record.
No, but ang laki ng Bulacan eh. So how much will that cost to put a fence all around
Then that means
Bulacan?
the coverage of the zone will not be as much and will only cover as much as they can fence. That is the intention of the amendment, Mr. President. It protects both BESA.
I hear you,
And,
I think lumalapit na yung wavelength natin in chairperson. But ang point ko, then why grant them by law the whole Bulacan if tayo pa lang, banging our heads here tonight, cannot figure out how they're going to do it?
Well, Mr. President, because again, since we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, that is the same with respect to Bataan. To those that they can comply with the requirements we will be imposing under this law.
Am I correct that Bataan only allows you to register and get the privileges outside the Mariveles area?
Yes.
But it is not an eco zone yung buong Bataan.
Hindi.
Oh, yun
Not
yun ang kaibahan sa Bulacan eh. Because sa Bulacan, which I'll go to later, pati public utilities ay binibigay na sa Bezo.
Mr. President, parang hindi naman yata because those that are already given a franchise will not be will not change. The franchise will be. No,
Thanks for that assurance.
Yes,
but
Mr.
I'll go to
President.
that later. But I'm just distinguishing na iba kasi yung, let's say, Clark and Subic, tapos sabihin mo, pwede mag-register yung nasa labas. And I acknowledge that. But what I'm saying is that, for example, in some of these areas, whether it's marshland or mga bakawan, may mga fish pond dyan. So iba pa kasi yung from agricultural to commercial. Iba pa yung alienable to disposable. So for example, riverbeds, inalienable yon. Hindi mo pwedeng ibenta yon. But if the provision is worded this way, pwede mo nang ibenta. So shouldn't we get from the LGU, DNR, DA, etc., the specifics? Or dumaan na lang sila sa usual process ng pagko-convert?
Mr. President, from my understanding, one way of converting also is through the legislative process. So this is the route that we're taking now.
Yes, that's 100% correct. But I checked with our committees. Nagpapasubmit tayo ng specifics ng conversion. Maraming conversion ang nabinbin dito dahil kulang yung sinibit ng congressman o ng LGU. So that's what I'm saying here. We just narrated barangays and places. And I know from a businessman point of view, parang hassle pa pagdaanan lahat yan, baka bumagal, etc. So we can help them do it faster by getting all this information and giving this conversion. But we cannot give it to them without looking into these areas and seeing whether we will cause more damage than good in fast-tracking it this way.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the concern also of our colleague. In fact, part of the ones that are composing the BESA board are members of the local government. We've actually increased the number of membership there. And then the DNR is also a part of it. Mr. President, even if it's part of the territory, it doesn't mean of the economic zone, it doesn't mean that a structure will be built, for example, in a riverbed if it's shifting and if it's classified as hazardous for a structure. But of course, I appreciate the comments of our colleague with regards to the importance of the proper identification of areas that may be considered hazardous in case a structure is built.
Mr. President, I want to emphasize the role of rules and laws. Di ba parang stoplight yan eh? When we were younger, and of course when we were more adventurous, gusto mo i-beat yung red light, gusto mo humataw. Kung 80 yung, ngayon 60 na lang ata eh. Nung bata kami, wala pa naman traffic, so 80 yung speed limit. But payabangan niya, naka 100 ka ba, 120, 130. I remember when the first Renault was released, someone from Alabang Hills to UP did it in like 15, 20 minutes, 5 a.m. The next few weeks, he did it again, nag-turn turtle, muntik ng maaksidente ng grabe. Because the rules are there to protect you. So my concern is if we grant this lock, stock, and barrel, first, what precedent do we now do? So pag may lumapit sa atin na ibang kongresista na sinabing this will also give jobs, this will all, so automatic natin i-convert. Kasi kung titingnan natin yung yung wording, any laws, ordinances, executive orders, rules, or regulations notwithstanding, eto masusunod. So we don't even have a list of those laws, those ordinances, those executive orders, rules, or regulations. So we don't even know what's there. So it's easy to say na ang riverbed, hindi ibebenta yan. But for us in Metro Manila, let's say the presiding officer, Senator JV, one of the great projects of his father was, at that time, napakalaki ng 700 million kasi bahang-baha yung San Juan River in 1998, hindi ba? Parang they had to desilt and everything na gano'n, di ba? And if you look at my hometown, let's say Pateros or some rivers in Taguig, pag medyo natuyo, yung iba, imumove na nila yung boundary ng bahay nila. So this is not like an obvious land grabbing na napapanood natin sa sine. Diba? This is, something that can happen over time. And if the law is not there to protect you, we will wake up one day na pag pumunta ka sa korte and say, oh, ba't mo binenta? Kaya bumabaha dito, dating estero yan eh. And then they will say, no. Section 5 of this law says that it is alienable and disposable. Diba? So either we get rid of this provision or we wait for the necessary documentation so that we don't make a mistake in these areas, di ba?
Mr. President, yeah, I feel that if our colleague here feels strongly about this, I believe he can propose that we remove that line so that we can subject that to a vote. Another thing is, I also understand that, let's say in Cagayan, an entire eco zone was built there, even in Aurora, and there's certain places there that are not exactly suited to having a structure. That's why we also included in the board a member from the DNR and also other presidential appointees, like, as I mentioned, DOTR and NEDA, etc., to be part of DOF, so that each individual concerns when it comes to the economy or when it comes to land conversion, there's a representation in the board. But of course, Mr. President, we know that based on experience, there's also been success in Bataan. In fact, they are wanting now an expansion of their ecozone. But if our colleague feels strongly about this, of course, we should consider it, because this is a body that has to debate so that we can come up with the best version of the law. But it's a collective body. That's why we also want the opinion of our other members.
No, I agree that it's a collective body. That's why we're trying to understand, and personally I'd like to understand whether the good chairperson would rather we propose to delete this or just ask the DAR and the DA and the local government to submit within 30 days. We have a 4-week, 5-week break. So we tell them that 1 week before our break, isubmit na nila. Then we can recraft this. So as I said, the airport has 12 years to get itself running. So doing this well and giving them a month to do their job would be very helpful. In fact, Madam Chair, Mr. President, if you want to add other cities and barangays here, for as long as kumpleto. So what I mean is that if it is a legitimate shortcut, diba, why not? Meaning, if we can speed things up, because it's diba, if you really have a door there and it's a natural door, you want to pass there kasi it's faster, why not? But if it's a shortcut in the terms that we missed some rules that will protect us, dun po ako medyo umaangal.
Yes, Mr. President, of course, I will await the proposal from our gentleman from Taguig to propose the removal of that particular
So
provision.
does that mean you would rather have it removed than give the agency 1 month to submit it?
Well, Mr. President, it's not me. Right now, I am entertaining what the pleasure is of our colleague. If he wants to propose that, then we will take it up.
No, Mr. President.
Or if his proposal is to wait for the submission, we can also divide the House and see what the opinion of the majority is, if it's necessary for them.
I was avoiding dividing the House. If we have to go there, isasama-sama ko na lahat ng kailangan i-divide. But that's why I was asking the lady, because you're the sponsor. And we usually give that courtesy to the sponsor that would you rather we delete it or would you rather we wait for them to submit it? Kasi wala naman urgency na ipasa to this week or next week eh.
Yeah, well, Mr. President, we try to work with a certain time frame, of course, so that this was already passed in Congress from their local representatives, the congressmen, directly from their districts. We've already consulted, we had in our hearing the support of the local government. So we also would like to hear, I'm the sponsor, but there's always a responsibility from the sponsor to hear also
Yes.
maybe whatever position our other colleagues have. So my position is, if the gentleman would like to present that as an amendment to delete that line, then we will open it for voting. If the gentleman would say that would also like to present to the body that maybe we should wait for the submission, I will also present that to the body, because there's really no use maybe prolonging it, because I'm already saying now that I would rather divide the House on this issue. So if he wants to...
That's clear to me, Mr. President, that from the point of view of the sponsor, this is urgent and would rather pass it rather than wait. She's entitled to her opinion, I'm entitled to mine. So I'll move on to... So in the same provision, Section 5, it talks about the general framework of land use. May I be enlightened on what will be the dynamics now of the land use submitted by the different LGUs vis-a-vis the land use that, what's the new name? BU? BESA would submit.
Yes, Mr. President, this is what the dynamic. There will be, I believe, 3 representatives from the LGU.
With your amendment.
Okay, so there will be 4 representatives from the LGU out of the 15. Plus they have the RDC representative. So that's 5 out of the 15. That's a third of the board. Now, they elect among themselves from the local government who will represent the province. And then from there, when it comes to the land use, let's say, of each particular district or province, that will be submitted to the board. So there's representation also, Mr. President, from the local government. Of course, this is how I see it. How I present it to our chamber, this is how we are able to get the concurrence of the local government, is also through their representation in the board.
So are we saying if the LGU does not concur, then hindi yung BESA ang masusunod kung hindi yung LGU? Kasi I do understand the dynamics, I do understand my representation, my board, but I'm talking about the rules, I'm talking about the law. Because whatever we give BESA, pwedeng hingin sa atin to ng SESA, ng APECO, ng AFAB, or that anything we will create later on. Even the Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao or the BARN can look at this and also ask for it. So right now, ang may duty na mag-submit ng land use is the LGU. So what if the LGU wants something different from what the economic zone wants? Kasi unlike, let's say, Bataan or like SESA, maliit na part lang nung province o city yun eh. So binibigyan na ng city yon or ng province na. So for example, ang BGC may ordinance ang City of Taguig na meron silang agency at meron higher than the building code na isang code. So kailangan pag inapprove ng city, inapprove muna, I'm not sure is it BGCEA or whatever, no? So meron mechanism. So it's not a matter of someone being in the board, pero klaro kung sinong masusunod at sinong hindi masusunod. So if one of the cities halimbawa says, I don't want a casino there, but the BESA says, I want a casino there. The other one says, marami na kaming residential so we don't want the aeronautic repair and maintenance here kasi pag nandyan yung aeroplano, maingay. Pero ang gusto nung BESA, doon sila. Sinong masusunod sa kanila?
Mr. President, in terms of an example, dun sa AFAB, ganun din, meron silang, it's actually, the decision of AFAB shall prevail. The decision of SESA shall prevail. Same with Zamboanga Eco Zone. So, Mr. President, the difference nga is we have another layer of safeguard kasi within the board, 5 members nga will represent the sentiments of the local government. Dito nga sa AFAB and the rest, wala naman local government representation sa board. Or yes, meron pero not the same number, not as much.
Thank you for that. I think we're almost meeting eye to eye. I'm just trying to look at situations. Being married to a local chief executive, our presiding officer being a former
Mayor.
local chief executive. These things can be very tricky, no? So may I refer you to Section 25, just in relation with Section 5, no? Can I take a 1-second break just to get to that point?
Yes, Mr. President.
That's good. I mean, although given, as Senator Joel was saying kanina dun sa pinapatanggal niya, minsan redundancy or just putting it in your face is good, di ba? So it's an assurance whether sa barangay or sa province na ano. So the concerned LGU shall operate and function in accordance with the framework of the Constitution, the local government, and this Act. So I agree with all three, but the next paragraph says, subject to existing laws, regulations, in case of conflict among so BESA na to and LGUs, on matters directly and inextricably affecting Bulacan Ecozone, other than taxation, national defense, and security, the decision of BACSEFA shall prevail. What is the intent of this? I mean, how do we actually implement this?
Mr. President, the reason why we also put that and at the same time amended and increased the number of members from the local government is that precisely the reason why we have an economic zone is also to expedite certain permits that we try to endeavor to achieve this even in our national policies to the anti-red tape that actions should be taken rather quickly on certain aspects of giving permits. So we feel that the representation of the local government in the board is actually maintaining its autonomy as well when it comes to decisions that will affect their area, the area in their vicinity. Mr. President, also, the reason why we have this board composition is that there may be parochial concerns that maybe the local government feels might be good for their locality, but in the bigger picture, there are also certain things to consider for the good of the entire country. So, and I feel that the board representation will be able to handle that, balancing the local concerns as well as the national concerns.
So I'll give you an example, Madam Chair, Mr. President. If one barangay in a lot for certain economic purposes, gustong alisin lahat ng tao doon, ayaw nung barangay captain, gusto nung mayor, I have a problem with the law saying BACSEFA or BESA ang masusunod. Hindi ba dapat wala na yung provision na yun at nakalagay lang ang batas ang masusunod? So whoever is in the right. So it's like, example ko, Madam Chair, sino ba masusunod dito? Si Senator Grace o si Senator Alan? It's not a matter kung sino masusunod sa atin. It's a matter kung sinong tama at mali.
Mr. President, unang-una, pag meron tayong batas pagdating na pag may nagre-relocate or mag-expropriate o yung mga ganon, that will take precedence in this. Of course, BACSEFA, wag na tayo ito, BESA will make a decision, and then that does not preclude them from questioning this in the higher court eventually to say that it's unfair, it violates other laws. So it's not an absolute, I guess, an absolute clearing just because BESA says it. There are other laws in the country that also govern that. Now, pag sinabi mo yung sa barangay captain, ayaw nilang mag-relocate, Siyempre, Mr. President, kailangan din tignan anong legal basis doon. Kung kanila talaga yung lupa na yon, siyempre, hindi sila talaga pwedeng alisin kahit na sabihin mong economic zone yon. Ngayon, kung i-expropriate yan, may proseso pa rin sa pagkakaintindi ko, Mr. President.
Yeah, I agree with you.
At saka, Mr. President, sorry, if I may just add this, ganun din kasi yung mga provisions sa SEZA, sa AFAB, so sa Zamboanga. So, kung magiging problema din ito, lahat din yon will follow. Kasi the ultimate decision is also within their board. But it can always be questioned.
Mr. President, again, I'll keep going to this and I'll go back to that later. Iba kasi po yung area. Yung potential area kasi nito is yung buong Bulacan and adjacent provinces. So the difference between saying, halimbawa, Clark, let's say Clark or Subic, they have their own security force aside from the police. So pag sinabing halimbawa, alis kayo dyan, tapos sabi nga, hindi kami alis, ancestral yan, Aita yan. When the Clark police goes there, alam na nila kung sinong susundin, alam na nila yung batas. But here, we're talking about the whole Bulacan. So if the security forces of the BESA comes, and then pinatawag din ang police, and then hawak-hawak nila yung batas, tapos sabi dito, sorry kapitan ha, kahit may titulo kayo, ang nakalagay dito, in case of conflict, BESA ang masusunod. Diba? So wouldn't we be more comfortable if it's a simple... I mean, because if you're talking about, let's say, policy, hindi kasi nakalimit to sa policy eh. Diba? So for example, if you're saying na tax policy or policy, let's say, on land use, etc., in case of conflict, and then may remedy sa courts. So this doesn't even say na may remedy sa court, and it also just says that BESA has authority. So if I was the lawyer of BESA, I can keep arguing this eh. So it might really cause problems. Buong Bulacan to ha. I really doubt that every single Kagawad SK member of Sanggunian understands the whole, because ako mismo, I'm still trying to understand and I'm still reading it. So I just don't want there to be any ambiguity so that they don't have to go to quarrels or unnecessary tussles, and very clear sa atin what we mean. So let me rephrase, no? So kasi it talks about relations with local government units and national government. So if you're saying that may autonomy, then you're saying that yung local government pa rin masusunod. If you're saying of this act, meaning anything in this act, so for example, no, kung hindi tatanggalin yung Section 5 and converted na yung lupa, then the kapitan, pag sinabi niyang hindi, agricultural pa yan, hindi mo pwede convert yan, then malinaw naman na sa Section 5 ng act, ang masusunod, yung act na to. But what if it's not in this act? It's just a policy matter of the board na hindi papayag yung mga taga-ron or yung mga NGOs or mga civil society. Wouldn't this be a dangerous provision by just saying that the BESA shall prevail?
Mr. President, will the gentleman from Taguig feel that it's safer to put in accordance with law, or maybe a wording along those lines to correct and to make it, as he says, not ambiguous?
Yes. So maybe, Mr. President, as we, with the permission of the good chair, can your staff and my staff work on the wording, or if Senator Coco, our legal expert, but I think we have the same wavelength here, di ba? How do we give the message na pagdating sa policy, nasa loob kayo ng eco zone, so eto, and you follow the local government code, the constitution, but also this act. But how do we word it in a way na hindi pwedeng i-abuse, di ba?
Right. Well, Mr. President, I think that's a good suggestion, just so we can be putting those safeguards that this does not invalidate laws that are already there. So except for certain ones that are already specifically mentioned here, like the creation of this BESA, for example, but maybe a reminder that there's always a recourse in case there's a question with regards to the decision of the BESA.
So one last point on that, since we are basically in agreement. So here goes my point, na if we're saying na gusto to lahat ng mga LGUs doon, then hindi na kailangan na sa law na sila masusunod kasi gusto nila eh. So that's what I'm saying, because it's so dynamic, the relationship between the LGU, may election tayo every 3 years, may barangay ka na hindi rin represented doon, may sanggunian panlalawigan ka. We cannot just keep saying na gusto to. I mean, in general, we all want this, di ba? But the details of the law is important. So, but I'll agree with you if we can find the right wording, no?
I think, I would request our team to work together so we can come up with a proper language.
Okay. In Section 2, it talks about the master plan. So, sino magpapagawa ng master plan?
Mr. President, the board will come up with a proposal for the master plan. That's why we included members from the different agencies. Nandyan yung DOF, DOTR, DNR, plus NEDA, DTI. So, of course, when you have those representatives there, they will also hire people that will do the study for them to present. So that's how they will come up with their study or the master plan.
I don't know what the right word is. It's the anchor or the flagship, di ba? Ang flagship kasi ng programa na to yung airport eh. And given naman yung airport. So wouldn't it be, and we all know that San Miguel and Mr. Ramon Ang is brilliant in all of this eh. So wouldn't it be better na may master plan na siya at yung San Miguel Airport, even if it's not to the last detail, and then based on that, we pass the law. Rather than baliktad, we pass the law first and then master plan. I'll go to what I'm pointing to now. For example, sa area, I'm a little bit uneasy, Madam Chair, na Mr. President, na floating yung area, na pwedeng 10 city, pwedeng buong province, and then sabi pati katabi ng province, no? So that means Pampanga, Quezon, Rizal, Metro Manila, Valenzuela in particular, can be part of the BESA?
Well, I suppose, Mr. President, when it comes to expansion, but then it's not that easy. First of all, there has to be legislation also for that. So they'll have to go through us again if they would like to expand to certain areas. And with that, also the concurrence of the ones that will be affected, the local government. I think that with the area that's already established or given to them, I think there's enough time for them. There's still a lot for them to develop within that area for them to continue expansion.
Madam Chair, I'm referring to Section C of the area of Section 3, Section C. Section C already provides surrounding areas. So the areas I mentioned do not need legislation anymore. If we pass this law, automatically pwede na sila. And what is your interpretation ng surrounding area? So as you get bigger, do you also consider the next surrounding area?
That's what, Mr. President, it's very clear here in the law that it says through presidential proclamation. So yes, it says surrounding area, but maybe our colleague can propose limiting it to Bulacan, within the area of Bulacan. We can also do that. We can divide the House for that. And even I think I'm a little confident to say that I can accept this amendment unless there's an objection from our colleague.
So let me go to letter B because I'm satisfied with your answer that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'll say, I'm a little bit uneasy na parang unli. No? And again, that's why I was asking, anong interpretation ng surrounding? Meaning, kung ito, tapos lumaki, pati ba ito surrounding na rin? Kasi I forgot who's the senator in the lounge kanina who said, ba't hindi lang tayo Freeport buong Pilipinas? O theoretically, kung yung surrounding, Freeport na tayo lahat. Diba?
Actually, Mr. President, yung Hong Kong Freeport, di ba?
Yeah.
And then a large area also Singapore, marami din sila. No, okay, wala tayo sa level na yan. First of all, the size of the Philippines is so vast. But I would like to thank our colleague from Taguig for proposing that. I am willing to amend it so that we can just say Bulacan and not include surrounding areas because that might be a little...
Thank you for that, Madam Chair, Mr. President. So naniniwala na ako may konti kang pagtingin sa akin by agreeing with me on that one point.
Hindi naman konting pagtingin. Depende kung ano ang pinopropose. Pwede rin nakatitig ako sa'yo.
Let me go to letter B. Madam Chair, I'm sorry kung medyo difficult na nakaharap ako sa dito kasi if I stay in the middle, malayo din ako sa staff ko. So I'm sorry if uncomfortable na You want me to move to the other side? And
No, it's okay.
Make my staff.
I can,
We're okay.
That's why if you
Sige.
don't mind also,
I also don't mind.
I keep walking.
I know when tinatalikuran mo ako because it's just convenient and when you don't want to talk to me. So I think it's the first part naman ngayon.
Mr. President, I think the consolation is he still has his sense of humor
Yeah.
because that's really what makes him so endearing to us.
Okay.
Yung mga hirit niyang ganyan.
Yeah, thank you.
Pwede ba maglagay ng salamin dito para nakikita na
Pwede
rin
naman.
kita?
So Beza yung pangalan, Beza.
Oo, Beza.
So pag may Sir Beza na yon. San Miguel Beer pa rin talaga.
Sir Beza.
Okay, letter B, remaining territories of Malolos, Mekawayan, Municipalities Bulacan, Paumbong, Giniginto, Balagtas, Bukawi, Marilao, Ubando, Santa Maria, Province of Bulacan. I have to be honest, on one hand, I'm really curious and excited for Bulacan to have a super economic zone. On the other hand, it's the first time na yung buong province will be part of an economic zone. So I'm a little bit concerned about the feasibility and how it will work. So for example, it will be a separate customs territory. So how will this work?
Well, Mr. President, as you know, Bulacan is huge. But then there are also entire countries that are free port zones. I understand we have to be very cautious kasi this is something that's new. It can be innovative, but there are risks involved. So we put here that there will be a customs office within that area, and initially in our discussion with our minority leader, there will usually what's happening now in Bataan, for example, before they even transport goods that are, let's say, with the tax exemptions, they obtain already a permit from their local customs office, and may oras doon kung kailan sila pwedeng magbiyahe, and their trucks are clearly marked. Now, that's how we are able to monitor also through ano matawag ito? RFID systems, GPS. Ngayon, syempre, kahit ako naman, aaminin ko, kahit na nga meron tayong customs yan sa mga ports na lulusutan. So kung meron talagang masamang balak, magagawa niya ng paraan. On the other hand, there's also a system already in place like in Bataan because their free zones are not actually contiguous eh. Magkakahiwalay sila eh.
But can I point that out? Kasi my father had the privilege of being EPS administrator, so I'm familiar with Mariveles. But ang ginagawa nila ngayon sa AFAB, di ba, may ilan lang areas outside na, what you call this, na pwede kang mag-register. But they still have bonded warehouses if you import tax-free mga goods. So if you look at AFAB, you look at Clark, Subic, 2, 3, 4, 5 lang exit entrance yan eh. At meron yan mga ano, di ba? So if you're gonna talk about eco zones the way they are today, for example, in Taguig, I think we may have more than 100 registered enterprise. But mga IT yun eh. So they don't bring in raw materials, they don't manufacture them, they don't smuggle or whatever, no? But ang Bulacan kasi will have 1,000 ingress-egress eh. So, how do we now... So, pag dumating yung... Kasi, mas mahal ang airplane eh. Mas mura pagka by ship eh. So, pag dumating sa Batangas Port or dito sa Manila, dadalin sa Bulacan, daming papasukan, daming lalabasan. Are we going to put 1,000 custom outposts, etc.? Diba? So, and then even the customs doesn't know right now which one's included sa zone at hindi, at ano yung private na bahay, ano yung dun o hindi. So,
Well,
this is an honest expression of trying to, diba? Kasi if I've never been to Clark, I also couldn't picture it. But since I was Clark, nakikita ko, then nung bata ako, I love going to yung PX sa Subic. Pero talagang pag-exit mo, titignan. Kung 5 kayo, pwedeng may 10 alak ka kasi 2 lang per. Kung may mga kasama ka na ninigarilyo nun, di ba? Kasi Blue Seal pa nun, binibilang talaga nila. And kung truck talaga dala mo na may mga cheese curls or ano ba yung mga imported, Oreos or whatever, pipigilan ka talaga pag truck. As you said, nilulusutan, but meron modicum of order and lanes and everything. But, you know, anyone who goes to Bulacan would know na, I mean, just from the Valenzuela city, there are probably 10, 15 ways to enter Bulacan, eh, di ba?
Well,
And Valenzuela is also industrial.
Right. Mr. President, this is what of course, that's why there's proper representation in the board. When they do the plan, the ones that are going to signify intent to register to BEZA, kasi iba naman yung eco zone, iba naman yung Freeport zone, no? Pwedeng i-cluster sila sa isang area so it's easier to monitor. I mean, this one, I will admit that there was really no presentation about this plan, but that does not stop them actually from proposing it, and hopefully, because I also spoke to the Secretary of Finance separately on this matter, and that's also one of his concerns, is the monitoring of those. So I'm glad you raised it. So I anticipate that when they do the master plan and submit it, because they have to build roads and they should cluster those.
Can you elaborate on that?
Mr. President, with the permission of the lady and gentleman on the floor.
Yes, Senator Escodero is recognized.
Just for the information of Senator Cayetano and Senator Po, I saw that gaping loophole too after I proposed my amendments. And I intend to propose an amendment basically when Senator Cayetano was taking up the matter during a lull in the deliberations in the lounge. That the customs territory, the Freeport zone, although the potential area includes a large portion of the province, I intend to propose an amendment that what will only be considered a Freeport zone or independent separate customs territory would be areas that are fenced. Because we're learning from our experience in Subic, in Clark, in CESA. These economic zones are not entirely fenced. And that's where the gaping loopholes occur and happen. So in this particular measure, we intend to propose at the proper time an amendment to plug that loophole that is currently found in those 3 economic zones at the very least that I'm aware of. In the others, I'm not sure. But in these 3 economic zones, I'm sure, Mr. President, Your Honor, CESA, Subic, and Clark, it's not 100% fenced too. I don't care how many gates they have. It's not entirely fenced also. But in this bill, we intend to propose an amendment that yung customs-free zone lang, yung Freeport area lang, should all be fenced. Although the bill makes mention of a potential larger area similar to the Bataan export zone, which includes, by the way, Mr. President, not only the province of Bataan, but also other areas outside of Bataan. Bataan is fenced, though.
May I request the good senator if he can stay there for a while? Because just to continue your logic, I agree with you yung fenced. What I'm going to, after I ask Senator Po, if pwede lang, ano yung proposed Freeport versus the eco zone? Because ang next if I can propose an amendment to your amendment na fence siya, pero contiguous at certain area. Rather than may fence area ka in this city, fence areas in that city, fence areas in that city. So medyo hirap ka. Remember, Clark covers both Pampanga and Tarlac.
Yes.
It's 35,000 hectares. But the whole area is fenced. So personally, I don't mind whether it's 10,000 hectares or 55,000 hectares. Basta contiguous at ano talaga, para malinaw talaga. Because you don't want na malugi yung ibang provinces because of smuggling or bumaksak yung industriya. And there's really so much money in smuggling. Di ba? I mean, 12% VAT is hindi po biro yan. So for you to be able to sell at pwera pa income tax, di ba, pag nag-smuggle ka. So it's such a big amount. And right now, we're not even talking about just the airport. We're talking from materials coming from Batangas and Manila Port going to Bulacan. No?
I agree, Mr. President. At the proper time, I would be willing to accommodate the proposal of the good senator from Taguig and Pateros.
So may I ask that, Madam
Mr.
Chair?
President, actually, just for the record, before Senator Escodero gave his proposal, I already said that perhaps the board would consider that proposal, which is to really segregate those that will try to avail of the fiscal incentive na talagang they're in a fenced area. And I mentioned that this was also the concern of the DOF Secretary.
So can you elaborate on how big will be the Freeport area versus, so the eco zone, so malinaw, di ba, na airport and airport city, 2,500.
Mr. President, I think that
Yeah, can our colleague
Sen-
not attend Fashion Week first and continue discussion with us?
Mr. President, ganito. I think when you say eco zone, it's not so much a physical area, but to register to receive the incentive. So it could be, it's actually not measured by the area itself, but if a company is registered for that particular.
No, I agree, Madam Chair, especially nung panahon namin ni Senator Cheese. Kasi nung panahon namin, halos manufacturing, wala pang IT, wala pang tourism enterprise now eh. Pero ngayon kasi meron ng tourism enterprise. So for example, kung magtayo akong hotel sa malapit sa Rasuin Church, and now that's part of the eco zone, I can actually now get incentives for staying there. Diba? So now, Bulacan has an advantage over Cavite, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, Tarlac, etc. No? Valenzuela, not to influence my colleague beside Senator Cheese. No? So diba, being a person from Bulacan, I want Bulacan to have all the chances, but it shouldn't be at the expense of others. So the Freeport will be confined to the airport city and contiguous, or it could be. What's the rule now of Freeport versus Ecozone? So am I correct? Yung Freeport, pwede kang magpasok tax-free, pwede kang magbenta tax-free, pero hindi mo pwede ilabas. Diba? So for example, if you're working in Subic, you can bring him a car tax-free, but dun mo lang pwede gamitin. Hindi mo
Pero
pwedeng-
Mr. President, for the manufacturing of goods dun sa Create, you can already sell domestically as long as you pay the proper taxes, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I'll go to
Diba?
that separately later. Kasi
Okay.
may issue din akong konti doon. But I was just going to your proposal and Senator Chee's proposal na pag finance, it's more important to fence the Freeport area because doon mo it's like the bonded warehouse, di ba? Doon mo kasi pinapasok yung So for example, no, let's say alak. Pag nagpasok ka ng alak, malaki sin taxes natin eh. If you sell it within the Freeport, it's tax-free. But once you take it out of the Freeport to be sold, this wasn't manufactured there, it was imported tax-free because it's a free port. So you can import kasi tax-free sa Freeport. Or are we not allowing this particular Freeport? Oh, this Freeport ba is only for what you call this raw materials, or you can also import? That's why nako-confuse nga ako what part of the Ecozone is Ecozone and what part is Freeport.
Mr. President, to clarify, my proposal pertains to the zone, not only the Freeport. Because my problem, if it's only the Freeport, which in this case refers to the airport, because there's no port here and there's no plan to create a port here. My problem is if we will only fence the Freeport, the manufacturing plant can be within the zone, and how can you now guard against them selling domestically without paying the proper taxes? So my proposal applies to the zone, to buzz.
Economic zone.
To the
Yeah.
buzz, not
Yeah.
the Freeport
But if
alone.
that's the case, sa laki ng Bulacan, we will need to advise from President Trump kung paano gumawa ng wall all around Bulacan.
Mr. President,
Kasi ang laki
malayong
ng
mas
Bulacan.
magaling ang Pinoy kaysa sa mga Amerikano on the record.
No, but ang laki ng Bulacan eh. So how much will that cost to put a fence all around
Then that means
Bulacan?
the coverage of the zone will not be as much and will only cover as much as they can fence. That is the intention of the amendment, Mr. President. It protects both BESA.
I hear you,
And,
and I think lumalapit na yung wavelength natin in chairperson. But ang point ko, then why grant them by law the whole Bulacan if tayo pa lang, banging our heads here tonight, cannot figure out how they're going to do it?
Well, Mr. President, because again, since we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, that is the same with respect to Bataan. It covers the whole province, although they did not cover the whole province. Although there's no requirement to fence it, this will. We're only talking of the potential area so that hindi na sila babalik sa Kongreso each time they intend to expand. We're imposing limitations and restrictions already if in case they want to expand. Although the potential covered area can cover a larger area. But the benefits will only accrue to those that they can comply with the requirements we will be imposing under this law.
Am I correct that Bataan only allows you to register and get the privileges outside the Mariveles area?
Yes.
But it is not an eco zone yung buong Bataan.
Hindi.
Oh, yun,
Not
ang
yet.
yun ang kaibahan sa Bulacan eh. Because sa Bulacan, which I'll go to later, pati public utilities ay binibigay na sa Bezo.
Mr. President, parang hindi naman yata because those that are already given a franchise will not be will not change. The
Thanks for-
franchise will be no,
Thanks
the
for that assurance.
Yes,
but
Mr.
I'll go to
President.
that later. But I'm just distinguishing na iba kasi yung, let's say, Clark and Subic, tapos sabihin mo, pwede mag-register yung nasa labas. Iba yun sa biglang buong Bulacan, we're creating an eco zone na covered sila ng board. So for example, outside the AFAB, yung board ng AFAB does not have the same powers ng board ng BESA. Outside AFAB, beso-beso lang sila, hindi sila pwede mag-BESA. Ito, ang BESA has authority outside the airport city. Doon yung AFAB, kailangan makisama pa rin sa local government.
For example, in the case of Cagayan, in the case of Bataan, the entire province, in the case of Cagayan, they named certain municipalities. Although it's part of the zone, you do not enjoy any benefits. Only if you are registered and qualified to register and actually get registration, can you qualify for any of the benefits that the Freeport zone or the zone, the eco zone would be offering. So kunwari, sa Bataan, sa Cagayan, ganun din, may mga pribadong bahay na mayroong may-aring pribadong individual, may mga eskwelahan na pag-aari ng DepEd, sinama sa area. Pero hindi ibig sabihin na yung mga establishmentong itatayo doon automatic ay magbe-benepisyo dun sa mga incentives sa ilalim ng panukalang batas na to. Magbe-benefit lamang sila kapag nag-qualify at nag-register at ni-register sila dun sa nasaan ba tayo?
Sa BESA.
Sa BESA.
Mr. President, if I may add, the initial brainstorming that we had in our discussion here, since it's not the actual territory but the registration in BESA that will make you avail of the benefits of tax incentives and no duties, maybe that's where we can fence the area. If you really want to register under the free zone benefit of BESA, then you have to be within a certain area carved out in that eco zone. Para you don't have to fence in the entire town or towns in Bulacan. Mr. President, did both of the gentlemen understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I have to ask you to excuse us. Sorry.
Do you want me to repeat?
No, he was trying to get me to move faster for your benefit. Can you repeat? I'm sorry for that.
Thank you for the consideration, the gentleman. No, because it's an economic zone, just like in Cagayan, but not all of the establishments there will have the qualification to register under BESA requirements. So, wala silang tax exemption. So, ang pwedeng gawin, siguro, di ba, anyway, we're trying to polish this, di ba, Mr. President, if those that will try to avail of the BESA free zone category or accreditation will have to relocate in a fenced-in area within the economic zone.
As far as that being for purpose of organization and efficiency, no, in tax collection, peace and order, I agree with you na yung administrator and yung board, they will do good on that kasi ano din nila yan income, reputation, and everything.
Sayang,
No? But my point is, alimbawa PESA, no? PESA started out with Bataan, then Cavite, then Cebu, Baguio. Then later on, they can accredit. So like halimbawa sa BGC, sa Fort Bonifacio, They have several there, almost 100 in the Taguig area, more than 100 in the Taguig area. But PESA has no authority over the BGC area. Di ba? They do have authority, almost complete authority, within the Baguio Export Processing Zone, within Cavite and ganyan. So, yun ang sinasabi ko na medyo mixed blood itong BESA. May pagka autonomous region because it's one whole province and you're giving the BESA its own security force. We're giving them yung a customs territory that will cover the whole, etc. So it's basically making the whole Bulacan an autonomous region. And that's why I'm honestly expressing my views that I don't know if I want it for the Bulaqueños because it's a great opportunity or whether nga it's too big an experiment kung yung buong Bulacan right away, no? So maybe to reframe the question, Madam Chair, shouldn't we, why do we need the whole area? I mean, if successful yung AFAB, just like Cheese, a fabulous senator, AFAB, kung successful yung AFAB, Clark, Subic, why do we have to put the whole Bulacan under the BESA right away? That's
Mr.
why.
President, kasi two successes better than one. 3 successes better than
Yes,
2. So,
but,
di ba,
but
we're trying to...
one small success that leads to 10 successes is better than one whole tapos magka-problema. Remember, we're talking about many things here. Balance of the provinces, balance. So you're going to basically put so much control in
So
this.
is the pleasure of the gentleman from Taguig maybe to identify certain areas only and that amendment can be proposed?
Going back, Mama, wala po akong, there's no malice in me asking who is the proponent. Kasi kung ang proponent nito San Miguel and they can come up with a master plan, sabi ko nga kay Senator Coco, I'm not saying hindi pwedeng, I'm just asking na hindi blank check eh. Isulat natin kung ano yung nasa check so that we know what we're getting, di ba? Kasi usually, kung sinong proponent, i-explain niya why 55,000 square, why the whole province, why the whole... because nga, you know, I would have the same reaction if we're doing this for Cavite. So, for example, the Remullas and Viratas had a proposal for a Cavite International Airport. And if they suddenly were proposing the whole Cavite to be a eco zone, I would totally understand, given their location, given their history in manufacturing, yung ginawa ng father ng Remullas in, you know, making a province that was basically agricultural and maraming peace and order problems to a very progressive province. But I would have the same reaction na ano ang pambalanse nito sa lahat. So, I mean, the gentleman from Bulacan is here. I was saying kanina, no, na for example, no, if I find some land near Brasuin Church and put it up there, I can put up a casino without incentives. But I can say that yung hotel is tourism and get incentives. So, because it's inside the eco zone. So, medyo nalilito ako dun sa character nung eco zone na to because nga it's the whole province. Eh.
Again, Mr. President, Your Honor, in Bataan, it's the whole province. In Cagayan, it's nearly half of the municipalities of the province, although they did not have a footprint in those up to today. Hindi pa nag-expand. But Senator Pimentel, during your exchange with Senator Po, earlier said, paano nga naman kung meron ng manufacturing sa labas, ng fenced, na pasok sa zone? Sabi ko, based on my amendment, if it is carried, he will not be granted a license or a permit because BESA cannot fence it since it's not contiguous. Ang point naman ni Senator Pimentel, kawawa naman siya. Sabi ko, under the bill, he can apply with PESA. And in theory, it has the same incentives and benefits. Sabi ni Senator Pimentel, baka gusto niya sa BESA wala na tayong magagawa. We have to choose between the best of both. We have to choose one between two choices. But Mr. President, the point I'm driving at is, Clark, Subic, and Cagayan are not fenced. And there is no requirement to fence the zones.
Clark and Subic are fenced.
It is not entirely fenced, Mr. President, Your Honor. It is not.
Some parts of Subic is actually forest.
It is not entirely fenced yet.
Pero all those with, I mean, if you're gonna smuggle to the forest, but wala si Robin Padilla dito, but if you're going to use the roads, it's all, may entrance lahat sila.
I agree, Mr.
They have a
President. But the
security
same is
force,
true.
it's covered and everything.
But the same is true for, pero kung gusto may paraan, kung ayaw palagi namang may
No, no.
dahilan. So yung gagawa ng paraan, gagawa ng paraan yun.
What I'm saying, Mr. President, Senator Cheese, if you say BGC, ilan lang entrance at exit doon? Dating kampo yun eh. So ang Subic at Clark dating kampo eh. Pero pag sinabi yung buong Taguig, may Laguna Lake ka, may Parañaque, may Makati, may Pateros, may Muntinlupa, may Pasig. So magkaiba talaga. It's not apples to apples. It's an apple orchard to an apple.
Mr. President, again, in the case of Bataan, although it covers the entire
But
province,
Bataan used to be PESA, EPSA, Mariveles zone.
Yes.
It grew from there.
It grew.
But naka-fence pa rin yung may port nandun.
I agree.
Inaalaw lang individually. Pero walang power ang AFAB na katulad ng powers nito to the rest of the province.
That's a different subject matter.
No, so
Yung power niya.
okay, if you're going to compare this to AFAB, if I may, Mr. President, then why don't we just give the same powers of AFAB sa BESA? So kung ano provisions ng AFAB, yun na rin ang provisions ng...
But
Mr. President?
generally, it is, Mr. President,
the
to my
same.
knowledge. In fact, for example, as you pointed out earlier, CESA even has more powers, for example,
No.
compared to
Ang-
AFAB, compared to Subic even, compared to BESA right now. In fact, aside from APECO, these are the only two zones that allow internet gaming up to today. And this is not the case in the case of Buzz or BESA. So there are distinctions between economic zones. Some have certain advantages over the others. Hindi ko sinasabing pagalingan, pero siyempre kada probinsya gusto magkaroon ng advantage. If you ask me, Mr. President, I would like a CESA 2 in Sorsogon, a Sorsogon economic zone, if we have the opportunity and the potential and privilege.
Quezon.
Sa Quezon yun eh.
Let's make it clear.
Quezon.
The benefits of jobs will go to Bulacan. But the benefits of this eco zone will go to the airport city, to San Miguel, and to whoever buys the 40% of the eco zone.
But
Hindi
Mr. President, there's
hindi-
also employment there.
Yes, that's what I said. Aside,
Yeah,
the
as
jobs
well.
will go to the Bulaqueños. Some property prices will rise. But this isn't like the basis conversion in Baguio, in Fort Bonifacio, in Pasay, na all the benefits went to the
No,
city.
Mr.
ah.
President,
President.
whatever the revenue of BESA is, 40% goes to the local government. 40% goes to the local government, 40% goes to the national government, and 20% goes to
Yes,
BESA.
and that 100%, it's much smaller than what they would have gotten if they weren't an eco zone. Kasi mas maliit yung 100% na yun dahil marami ng exemption yung kumpanya na yun na magbibigay ng 100%.
Mr. President, just for the record,
Pero wala pa naman nandun eh.
unlike Clark, although it was the
No,
Americans,
walang nandun sa Bulacan na magkakaroon because there's an airport, but in Malolos, in other cities in Bulacan, there are a lot of businesses there. It's a thriving province.
Mr. President, just for the record, unlike, well, in the case of Clark, although it's the Americans that built it, government funded it, now it's operated by the private sector as well. So whatever benefits accruing to that airport, now operated by the private sector, revenue going directly to the private sector operator, that we do in Clark will benefit him too. In this case, government did not and will not spend, based on the franchise granted earlier by Congress, will not spend a single centavo building this airport. So whatever benefits accruing to it by way of traffic, perhaps, cargo, wala naman din ginastos yung gobyerno sa pagpapatayo ng airport. Hindi tulad nung Clark nga, na nasa pribadong kamay na rin. At in the case of NAIA, lately, binid out na din. Am I excused already
Yeah.
by the gentleman from Taguig?
Pwedeng-
Because it's...
Yeah. No, last one item because the good senator chairperson mentioned it na. Yung about the...
Did you say last item? Mr.
No, last item na kasama si Senator Cheese. Anong yung sa utilities? Sa public utilities, Section 13, Paragraph B. D. Undertake, establish, construction, operation, maintenance of public utilities, other services, and infrastructure in the Bulacan Eco Zone. May I ask the purpose for this provision?
What section again, Mr.
Section 13, letter D.
Section 13, letter D. Okay, letter D.
D as in delightful.
Undertake the establishment, construction, operation, maintenance of public utilities, other services and infrastructure in the Bulacan Eco Zone such as light, power, etc. provided that such shall be in compliance and coordination with the rules and regulations of the concerned departments and agencies. So what's the question of our colleague?
So what's the purpose? Why give the authority this power? Why not the private sector? So why give them the monopoly of that's a separate franchise by itself, eh? Kasi public utility includes distribution of electricity, transmission of electricity, petroleum and petroleum products pipeline, water pipeline distribution, seaports, and public vehicles. So if you have that provision, they can actually put up their own port, so it will now compete with the Manila and Bulacan seaport. And again, we don't have a study regarding that. But this provision will allow them to do that.
Well, Mr. President, sometimes when there's an expansion needed or an improvement in maybe laying out for telecommunications or other infrastructures, it could be a joint venture between the public sector and the private sector. In this case, we also put a provision that says that if it's a franchise already given, let's say to Meralco, hindi naman magte-take over
Saan
doon
po
yung
yun? Saan nakalagay yan?
section ano ba yun? The franchise shall not be...
C, 13D.
Section 13B, saan dito yun? It's in the, it was in the amendment that we put in earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, we can
Sorry,
read it.
amendment. Okay. No, I mean, of course, I'll take your word for that. So, kung may existing franchise,
Hindi pwedeng
hindi pwede
baguhin.
sila. Okay. If that franchise is revoked or runs out, will it be automatically BESA na?
No, Mr. President, because we can't take that authority or power mandate away from Congress.
Yeah, but-
It's Congress that will only be the ones to grant a franchise.
Then, because basically without using the word franchise, letter D is actually granting them a franchise. Wala lang yung word na franchise because they're allowed to establish, construct, and operate, maintain public. That's a franchise.
Well, maybe, Mr. President, a line can be proposed that says that for undertakings that require a congressional franchise, then they need to go through the process of securing a congressional franchise.
Or would it be possible, Madam Chair, to make it more broad that, for example, no port. For us to put up a port in any other place in the whole country, you need, if I'm not mistaken, the Port Authority study and everything. Eto kasi, if I was the lawyer of BESA and I saw this, I can build it. Pabayaan mong questionin ako ng Philippine Ports Authority or questionin ako ng Meralco or whoever. Secondly, could we put that, kasi iba yung sabihin they may, but what about others? Because I personally do not like monopolies. So Bulacan is so big. So if you only have one distributor of electricity or water or it's going to lead to abuse.
Yeah,
Iba
but-
kasi pa rin sa Clark at sa Subic kasi nga compound yun eh. So
Pero
it's-
malaki rin ang Clark, mas malaki pa yung Subic.
Yes, but if sasabihin mo pa kasi sa Clark at Subic na 2-3 kayo doon, ang mangyayari doon, baka walang gumawa. Unlike sa Bulacan, it's an existing province.
That's why it's an existing province with existing utilities already, with franchises that were granted to those. So, to revoke a franchise actually takes longer than just an instant revocation. They have to, there should be a case filed in Congress, and then doon pa, ang dami nga nakalusot na mga hindi compliant pa nga sa lower house. So, meron din ngayon na revoke sa lower house na franchise, pero kailangan pa rin dumaan dito sa atin. So, hindi na naman ganun kadali na mawalan ng prangkisa.
Yes, Madam Chair, but for example, I wouldn't approve in this Congress, or hindi naman ako pwedeng mag-approve lang, I wouldn't vote for one company to help bulk terminals in Cavite, Batangas, Bulacan. But basically, we're giving this to them. If you look, it's wholesale ito. Services, infrastructure, light and power, shipping, barging, stevedoring, cargo, handling, hauling, warehousing, storage of cargo port services, concession piers, bulkhead, bulk terminals, mooring areas, storage areas, roads, telecommunications. They can put up their own Smart and Globe.
Mr. President, yung mga ibang eco zones, ganun din yung mga
Yeah, but
provisions.
the other eco zones are not the whole province.
Well,
Bulacan is one of our biggest highly populated
It's not also the
province.
whole province of Bulacan. There are only
No,
10.
under A and B, it's the whole Bulacan.
Well, it can expand, but it's still
Yeah.
not. I mean, it's something that we can, that it's not yet defined here in the law which provinces that is. Those are.
Yeah, but
aside
Madam
from-
Chair, iba po yung can expand by legislation, Iba yung nasa law na you will eh. So, nakaabang na to eh. Nakaabang na kasi, ayan, letter B. The remaining territories of the city of Malolos and
But
Mekawayan
other,
and of municipalities of Bulacan, Paumbong, Giginto, Balagtas, Bukawe, Marilao, Obando, and Santa Maria in the province are not yet included as component parts. And then letter C, all other areas or municipalities whose meets and bounds shall be clearly defined within the province of Bulacan. So we only agreed na tanggalin yung surrounding areas. But yung whole province of Bulacan, nakaabang na yan eh.
well, ganun din sa sa Bataan actually ngayon.
Again, there's a big difference between Bataan and Bulacan, whether the population, the location. NLEX is not beside Bataan. Bataan needed it because nga, you know, of its geographic location, etc., etc. So may pagka-affirmative action din to eh. Yung sa paglalagay dun sa mga area na yan.
Okay, so Mr. President, I actually understand the concern of the gentleman. Perhaps by the proper wording, we can put those safeguards para hindi lahat
I agree with you,
masama.
but why not instead of safeguards, why not just let free market determine the public utilities as it is now in Bulacan?
Because, Mr. President, there are already franchises granted. So maybe what we can put is
That's what I meant, Madam Chair.
No,
Why don't we allow it? So kung may gustong gumawa ng highway doon, why stop them? Why should the BESO have the sole authority to build any highway in Bulacan? So you will take away from the others. So for example, although nabasa ko recently that MVP and RSA might collaborate on certain expressways, but you see that NLEX and SLEX are handled differently. So under this present one, it's only BESO who can determine that.
no. Well, Mr. President, one thing is if there are, roads or areas there that need to be developed or transportation terminals, etc. That's going to be part of the master plan of the economic zone. It will go through a board, which, by the way, Mr. President, as I mentioned, DPWH kasama. DP kasama. DOTR is part of, as I mentioned, NEDA, DTI. I mean, within the board itself, there's already representation by the national government and also the local government. So the reason why we're trying to establish also an eco-zone is so that, as I mentioned, there can be expediency also. But again, I will defer again to the wisdom also of our colleague. If there's proper wording that he would like to propose, we will accept it.
Madam Chair, what I'm saying kasi the majority will prevail, but it doesn't mean that the majority is always correct. That's why I'm appealing to our reason na hindi naman siguro tama na isang buong probinsya, i-award natin isang eco-zone, then lahat ng ports, lahat ng kuryente, tubig, etc., sila lang ang pwedeng mag-determine.
Mr. President,
So, may I finish? So, parang sasabihin natin sa Bulakenyo, huy, magde-develop kayo. Pero hindi natin alam, libre pala yung baril, mahal pala yung bala. Mahal pala yung tubig, mahal pala yung kuryente, yung palang port, eto lang ang pwede, because you're taking out the opportunity for the Bulacan government and the national government from allowing other bidders to build all of this. By having them represented in the board, tali pa rin ang kamay nila.
Well,
So
Mr.
the
President,
DOTR, may I finish lang? The DOTR secretary will be in the board. But if the DOTR secretary says SM or MVP wants to build the highway here, the board can shoot him down and say, hindi, BESO lang ang authorized dito. So if they want to do it, mag-propose sila sa BESO.
Mr. President, it doesn't say that solely responsible. It says undertake the establishment. It doesn't say solely undertake the establishment. So, pwede pa naman dito na makapasok yung
Madam
iba.
Chair, pero katulad ng port,
But it should be, sir, in compliance and coordination with the rules and regulations of concerned departments and agencies. So, kung hindi naman ito papayag yung DPWH or DOTR, kahit na sabihin mo, na may board representation sila, yung ibang departments na hindi kasama sa board can still have a say and strike it down. Like, let's say DPWH na hindi kasama sa board, but they're an agency of the government, they can resist giving a permit. Even the local government, Mr. President, although they have representation in the board, it does not take away their autonomy to grant building permits and business permits. So, meron pa rin po. It's a delicate balance also of maintaining the autonomy of the local government.
Madam
at the same
Chair,
time,
under the ease of doing government law, ang nakalagay kasi dito, they only have to comply with the rules and regulations. But the legislative authority is given to them na. So katulad ng seaport, halimbawa, you cannot put 2 seaports near the Bulacan Airport. You cannot put that. It's not economically viable.
And then, pwedeng
if-
pumayag yung, because
Madam
under
Chair, if I
the
may
departments
finish.
and agencies,
Yeah,
the Philippine Ports Authority can just say hindi pwede yan.
They
fall
cannot,
under,
Madam Chair, they cannot, because it says here under the law, as long as you follow the rules and regulation. When you follow the rules and regulation under the ease of doing business law and the anti-red tape, hindi pwedeng i-deny yung permit mo. May legislative authority ka na eh. Sumunod ka sa rules.
Mr. President, rules and regulations of departments and agencies.
Yes. They have two things. They have authority to grant the license, and they have the rules and regulation. If you already gave the legislative authority, sinabi mo na eh, pwede kang gumawa ng port. All you have to do is to download from the internet yung requirement sa port. It has to be this big, it has to be this, it has to be... Hindi ka na pwedeng pigilan ng DOTR or ng Ports Authority na gawin yon.
Hindi, Mr. President, if the DOTR, the Port Authority, finds something wrong, for example, it's dangerous to build in that area or ano, they can still strike it down.
Of course, if it's dangerous. But if not dangerous, but it's they complied lahat. Pero iba ang gustong gumawa, hindi Beso. Beso can block them. And Beso can say, hindi, kami ang gagawa. So, kung sinong gagawa ng port doon, dapat hindi Beso ang mag-decide. Ang mag-decide dapat nun, kasi we keep expanding eh. First, it was an airport, then an airport city, then an eco zone, and then now, pati kuryente, tubig, bus, highway. So, gumagawa ng sariling autonomous region or may Republic of San Miguel dito sa Bulacan, which I think is unfair to other businessmen.
Hindi naman po, Mr. President. Ako
No, that's the ano eh. That's
I
the
mean, I'm not,
implication.
you're the lawyer,
Yeah.
Mr. President, so I will wait for our colleague to propose a language that he feels comfortable with. But my understanding is, within the eco zone are also private lands that cannot just be usurped. So if there's a private development there between somebody, they can still build. There's no express language that says the Bacsesfa can
Madam Chair,
deny them.
Madam Chair, if I was the Villar Group or the SM Group or the MVP Group at bibiling ko yung lupa, I will check muna kung papayag yung authority na bibildan ko. Kasi kung hindi rin mapapayag yung authority, ba't ko bibilin yung lupa? Eh, ang problema, hindi na sila tutuloy sa DOTR, sa PPA, sa ERC, etc. Kailangan pa nila magmano sa Beso, which, for all practical, is intimately tied with the airport city and San Miguel Corporation. So that's the reality there. Eh.
No, but Mr. President, di ba sinasabi nga natin yung composition ng board, most of them are appointed by the President. The others are ex-officio members, and the others are from the local government. So kahit nasabihin mo itong San Miguel may be the biggest investor, may checks and balances. That's why we put that in the But again, Mr. President, again, the expert here, I suppose, legally, I would like to wait for your actual amendments, Mr. President, and we can accept it.
Yeah. Well, the easiest way to do it is, which I thought that's what we believe in this country, is free market. That anyone can come in any province in our country. There are exceptions with enclosed former military camps, and there are reasons for that. But for example, Metro Manila, pinaghatian niya ng Maynilad at Manila Water. Dahil hindi nga mature enough pa yung market na sabay sila at ganyan. So may mga ganun accommodation. But for example, Smart at Globe, hindi natin sila pinagbawalan na mag-compete, but to give now the power to this entity to have their own telecommunication system so they can put up the Bulacan Telecoms.
Mr. President, I mean to endeavor, like for example now, because we've opened the Public Service Act and we've seen that certain like telecommunications is no longer a natural monopoly. In fact, SpaceX can provide service in that area. Converge can provide service in that area, and other telco companies. Kasi nga, hindi na nga natural monopoly yun eh. Wala na yun sa Public Service Act na sinasabing natural monopoly. There are just a few categories. So, Mr. President, pag sinabing free market, free zone, I mean, it's a principle of
No, Madam Chair,
encouraging.
it's called a free zone because walang taxes.
No, I know what you
because
mean.
they're-
But that's why we're saying the principle of free market is to encourage nga more capital, more investors. So I'm awaiting also what is the proper language that will guarantee.
That's why, Madam Chair, the question is, why are we giving them this gift? Hindi naman kasama sa pag-free zone yan eh. Di ba? Because this is nga an existing province. This isn't a new vacant lot or a redevelopment or a military camp na i-develop mo. Kung halimbawa i-develop mo ang Fort Magsaysay, then by all means, all of these powers ilalagay mo dyan because except for the military housing and training areas, you have nothing there. But Bulacan is filled with people, filled with businesses, with enterprise and everything. And may mga plano na lahat dyan. The top 10, top 15 na real estate developers, may plano lahat dyan.
No,
Now,
Mr.
if
President-
you make it all subject to
Right.
BESA, then it changes the level playing field in the whole province.
Okay, the power, this is the understanding that we have. The power given to BESA is not to the exclusion of other public utilities. There's no express language in the bill prohibiting other utilities to set up. In fact, that is the essence of our amendment earlier. We don't want to exclude others. BESA does not even give the franchise. It is still the agencies and Congress. So, Mr. President, we can expound on this, but I would also would
two
like
questions
to,
about that. One, if other entities do not have a legislative franchise but we already gave them, then sila lang ang pwedeng gumawa.
Oh,
So yun nga, so shouldn't we give everyone?
I'm sorry.
We already gave BESA eh. So like telecommunications, kailangan mo ng franchise para magkaroon ng telco eh.
We're not giving BESA a franchise, Mr. President.
Wala lang yung word na franchise, but we're
To
basically giving them a
undertake-
franchise.
To undertake. Mr. President, it's just saying that they're not excluded from perhaps undertaking it. But they still, after they undertake this, let's say they want to build infrastructure for telecommunications, for them to be operational, they have to apply for a franchise with Congress. I mean,
They don't have to, Madam Chair, because tignan niyo yung wording ha. Undertake the establishment, construction, operation, and maintenance of public utilities, other services, infrastructure in the Bulacan Ecozone, such as, then ninarrate niya, no?
Mr.
As-
President, will it help if we can just put, provided that they should be in compliance with Congress right to grant, Congress mandate to grant a franchise, and concerned departments, permits, and agencies?
My point, Madam Chair, is that if you take this out and they want to do it, they can still apply eh. But if you put this, basically you're giving them all the power na eh.
We're not giving them all the power if they have to still be
No, ma'am,
compliant.
because they have to establish, they can construct, they can operate.
Okay, that's why, Mr. President, this is curative. I believe that when we're doing an amendment, we're trying to cure whatever flaws the bill has.
Yes,
So
Madam Chair.
instead of arguing about it, that we're giving them that power, I agree with our colleague here that we should put something that says that they have to still go through the regular the regular process in obtaining such permits. Can we do that, Mr. President?
Yeah.
Okay. Do
maybe-
you have the proposal ready, sir?
And no, precisely that was my question because, for all I know, when I asked the question, baka may specific reason nga why we're granting
No,
them.
okay,
them
so
that,
so
diba?
let's work on that, Mr. President.
Okay. So, may I go to the board of directors? First question, why did we digress from the usual board ng ibang mga ibang ecozones?
Ecozone. I believe, Mr. President, the reason why we did that is we wanted more participation from national government agencies as well as more representation from the local government to guarantee also some sort of autonomy for them.
Yeah. But under the proposal in this bill, it will ensure that the chairman will be a nominee of the San Miguel Corporation Airport City.
No, Mr. President.
No, anong section?
They will be he will be elected among the members.
Yes, he'll be elected among the members, but all of the members cannot be elected because you're not allowed to chair a eco zone if you already have a different government job. That would be unconstitutional. So ang natira na lang na pwede, yung representative of airport project at yung eco zone workers and yung private sector. But yung lahat ng iba kasi, like governor ng Bulacan, hindi ka pwedeng governor ng Bulacan tapos chairman ka ng ano. Diba? So all the others, APECO, CESA, AFAB, the chairman is appointed by the president or it's ex officio a cabinet secretary. So why don't we just make the chairman appointed by the president?
We can if you have a proposal, Mr. President, that we can amend.
Yeah, it's not just a proposal, it's pointing out that we want to keep a Chinese wall. We want the synergy and we want the airport to be successful. But we want to prevent a conflict of interest between the private-led San Miguel Corporation and the publicly owned BESO. But under the way it was crafted, ang magiging chairman dito, representative ng airport project. And then, if you look at the powers, the board or the president can give the chairman the powers of the administrator. So he can basically take over. So, basically, he gave the whole province to the owner of the airport. So private na to. So ibang-iba na.
Ken.
Yeah, Ken.
They
I'm
can.
talking about
But
Yuri.
diba sabi mo nga, merong representative of the labor, bakit dun sa mga AFAB, sino yung representative?
No, sa AFAB, administrator is chairman.
BPI. So pwede rin, kung gusto ninyo, ganon. Pwede rin.
Just so that it's consistent. Again, di ba?
Dun sa AFAB, elected among the members of the board,
No, the AFAB, it's administrator of AFAB is the chairperson.
sineparate na nila yon.
Amended.
AFAB has amended it, separate na yung chairman and administrator.
As a default under the Philippine Constitution, the president, di ba, appoints. So if it's okay with the chairperson, the good senator, why don't we just let the president choose the chairperson so that at least the administrator, kasi the president is accountable
Yeah, Mr.
accountable
President,
to all
with
of us.
the
yeah.
proposal, please propose the amendment and we will look into it.
Yes. And then, can we make it clear? I don't know how to word it. I know that wasn't the intention, but if you read the powers of the chairman, parang pwede ibigay ng board or president yung powers ng administrator. Kasi ang pagkaintindi ko, ang CEO or COO is the administrator. The chairman is really the chairman of the board, really policy making, di ba? Unless we intend it to be both, then gawin na natin clear.
No.
So it's like
We
BCDA,
can have
iba
a-
yung
pwede na
presidente,
magka-point.
iba yung yeah.
Yes, Mr. President, yes, that could be an amendment for the president to appoint the chairman.
Yeah.
Of individual amendments. And so, Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Grace Po, and to continue with his individual amendments, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano. So move, Mr. President.
Yes, Senator Grace Po, the chair, and likewise Senator Alan Cayetano are recognized.
Mr. President, let me end my questions and interpellation.
Mr.
with-
President, if I
want to-
Go ahead.
minority leaders.
Yes, the minority
Yes,
leader is recognized.
Mr. President, just a point of order because our majority leader has reminded us that we have spent the whole day for this bill. Is this even a certified urgent bill, Mr. President? Is it? I mean, is it? So my question is, if it is not, why are we doing this, Mr. President?
Majority leader.
Mr. President, we have been committed to pass urgent measures, Mr. President, as agreed upon by the members of the Senate during the caucus. And despite the fact that this is not an urgent measure certified by the President, I, for one, Mr. President, as a true-blooded Bulaqueño, believes that this is an important measure. And so I appreciate the fact that a lot of our colleagues are literally burning midnight oils, Mr. President, just to work on this very important landmark piece of legislation.
Likewise, we have last 3 remaining days next week, so we are trying to pass whatever we can on second reading today, so that until next week we can be able to pass everything on third reading.
Yes, Mr. President,
Yes,
that's exactly
but I've noticed some contentious issues, Mr. President. So my next question is, do we even still have a quorum, Mr. President, to continue to transact business?
Mr. President, before ruling on that or suspending, minsan lang ako nandito ng gantong oras. Wag naman sana ako pauwiin at piliting pauwiin ni Coco. Hayaan niya nang nandito na muna ako hanggang gantong oras. Bihira lang to. Okay na yon.
And then, and also a hardworking gentleman from Taguig is also here. Come on, let's celebrate this time.
This is a rare opportunity.
This is a rare occasion that both gentlemen are here, and let us
Precisely.
take advantage.
Precisely, Mr. President, I feel that something is different. That's why I raised a point of order. Something strange is going on, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I think some of our colleagues are just so used to cramming that at the very last minute, we always submit on time.
Yeah. Mr. President, for the record, let me put into the record, Mr. President, that at this point in time, it's 9:25 p.m. We still have at least 14 senators in the premises, Mr. President. And Senator Cayetano. Especially Senators Cayetano and Escodero, Mr. President.
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry. Can I question if I am here or not?
Mr. President, for the sake of the quorum, I will testify that Senator Cayetano is present.
So now we may now proceed.
Mr. President.
Senator Cayetano,
Yes.
Senator Grace
Yeah,
Po, Senator Cayetano.
I'll end with the manifestation. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the presiding officer, the majority leader, especially the chairperson, Senator Grace Po, Senator Escudero, for their very for their wisdom in the parliamentary maneuver of talking to me and talking to the rest of the group in the lounge. But for public disclosure and para lang po maintindihan ko anong pinag-usapan, may I just make this manifestation. And of course, Senator Grace po and Senator Escudero can correct me if I'm wrong. I just expressed that, again, this is a good bill, but I want to make sure that the boundaries between being a super eco zone and being an autonomous region is quite clear. And we agreed to disagree on certain things. But first and foremost, I think there's a consensus among us that if we're going to have a super eco zone, mas magandang walang new gaming or gambling institutions there, at least for the Senate version, and hopefully we'll fight for it in the BICAM. Secondly, the concern of Senator Coco, Senator Lauren De Garda, and Present, that any of the conversion will be done through law, but the authority will make sure that the prerequisites will be there to make sure that the ecology and the environment is guided. I think Senator Escudero will will do the language. No? Number third, just to make sure that the board is both accountable and balanced, we'll make sure that the private sector has a representative, the airport city has a representative, and the workers have a representative. But the chairman will be appointed by the president, who in the end is accountable to the Filipino people. Number four, that public utilities, we will just be silent because the authority, being a citizen, being a corporate citizen, being a GOCC, can apply for any of the public utilities that they want. But just to give the signal that Bulacan is open to business for everyone. We might disagree on certain points of this because other eco zones were given as specific provisions on public utility. But I said, just to give us more time on that, no? And then I'd like to thank, again, Senator Escudero, Senator Grace po, because of the assurance that we will have the proper time, because our version apparently will be different from the House version. So whatever we will not accept now in the Senate version, we can continue to study, we can continue. So personally, I would like to take this opportunity to ask NEDA, come out with a quick study, di ba? Or at least preliminaries, or at least ano ba nangyari nung ganito nangyari sa Clark or sa AFAB, etc. No? In that way, both the sponsor will be satisfied because she really believes this is something good. I will be satisfied because I will not be guessing. Economics is not my forte. No? There are a lot of other minor things, including the area. So the good sponsors already agreed na yung surrounding, wag muna natin ilagay yon kasi medyo nebulous ng konti. And I would later on advise the BICAM lang na if there are additional areas, ano yung requisites para hindi lang parang who wants to join. Di ba? Kasi nga yung Clark, Subic, others, they were former military bases so yung meets and bounds nila klaro na. So let me stop there and hope that we will be able to really craft a good law. I hope this is successful not only for Bulacan but for the whole country. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and good sponsor, Senator Grace Point. Thank you very much, our presiding officer, the good one among the presiding officers.
Mr. President, I would like to thank also Senator Alan Cayetano, of course, being one of the veteran members of the Senate, and also one of the ones that have advocated for the development, let's say, of Clark. He's already has had experience also in developments that are similar to this. I would like to thank him for pointing out something that we strongly feel should be upheld in this eco zone, that as much as possible there should be no gambling, either online, off-site, or on-site. So hopefully this is something that we can also lobby within the BICAM. So thank you again for your contribution, Senator Alan, and hopefully to see you in the BICAM together with Senator Escudero if you should be appointed by our body.
Manifest, I forgot the last point. The last point
Yes,
is that
Senator
the
Cayetano.
two good senators and the rest of our colleagues agreed to take a second look at the law of BCD and Clark so that mag-complement nga yung AFAB, Clark, and Bulacan rather than just competing with each other. So I again, in behalf of the people from Bataan and of course Central Luzon, which includes Bulacan, Pampanga, Tarlac, this will be a very good kung maayos natin ito. No? I told the good chairperson, no, maybe you can also look into a possibility of an oversight committee. Nung una, inisip ko authority. I told her inside the lounge, baka authority kasi para ma-balance yung tatlo. But tama din naman ang chairperson natin, baka lalong gumulo. Maybe a congressional oversight over it. I don't need your answer now. Please consider it lang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Francis Tolentino is also seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized.
Senator Francis Tolentino is recognized.
Mr. President, just a slight interjection, cum manifestation. Perhaps the Senator Cayetano might have overlooked, but the role of the LGU should not be diminished, Mr. President. An assurance from the sponsors that the LGUs would be highlighted, the role would be highlighted, and even upgraded as well, Mr. President. Just for the record. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino.
Mr. President, Senator Chis Escodero, the gentleman from Sorsogon, is also seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized for his individual amendments.
Senator Francis Escudero is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. My understanding is we are in the period of amendments, but before proposing my amendments, I would like to place on record my sincere thanks and appreciation to the gentleman from Taguig and Pateros. Taguig na lang yan. Taguig na lang yan. Taguig and Pateros, because he used to represent Pateros as well.
And Makati, no?
For his inputs, and Makati,
Pembore.
and what used to be Makati, for his inputs, hindi siya yun. For his genuine concern, Mr. President, in protecting the Filipino people in our country and preventing abuses, learning from the experiences of the past. And I thank him as well, Mr. President, because I learned a lot. So that when the time should come that I would propose a Sorsogon economic zone, I will make it the best economic zone, even better than all of our existing economic zones. And I would like to author the economic zone in Quezon. Para Quezon na talaga yun. Quezon Economic Zone.
Yes.
Having said that, Mr. President, again, my appreciation for his understanding and patience as well with me and with Senator Grace. May I propose the following amendments, Mr. President? I'm referring to the committee report version, Mr. President, in proposing these amendments. On page 1, section 2, line 11, after the period, insert the phrase, quote, it is also the declared policy of the state to promote an effective and sustainable economic growth model that benefits all stakeholders. I so move, Mr. President.
The sponsor?
Is this something that was sponsored by the gentleman, or is he reading the...
From the lady from Antique.
Okay, I accept, Mr. President.
Accepted by sponsor. Amendments approved.
So hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panonood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat at hanggang sa muli. Paalam.